Something is shifting in them, not dramatically, not with the clean, announced quality of a realization that arrives fully formed and immediately produces action. In the quieter way that genuine recognitions always arrive in the avoidant, sideways, in the unguarded moments, without the management protocol having time to intercept and minimize it before it lands. They are beginning to understand what they had, not in the abstract sense of knowing a relationship was good, in the specific, located, this particular person's sense of understanding what you specifically brought, what the quality of your presence actually was, what the relationship was capable of being, what their life has been without the specific thing you offered. This realization is real. And it is worth understanding honestly, not because it changes what is practically available, not because realization automatically produces action, but because accurate understanding of what is actually happening serves you better than either inflated hope or unnecessary doubt. Why the realization arrives late. The avoidance capacity to fully register another person's value is structurally impaired by proximity to that person, not because they are oblivious, because the alarm runs alongside the appreciation. The closer you were, the more the alarm was running, scanning for cost, calculating what continued presence required, managing the distance that the intimacy kept threatening to collapse. In that state, the full landing of your value was not possible, not because the value was not there, because the alarm was competing with the perception. Every moment of genuine appreciation was accompanied by the alarm's countersignal, this matters, which means this can be lost, which means this is dangerous. The appreciation and the fear arrived together, and the fear was louder. Distance quiets the fear. The alarm, with its immediate trigger removed, reduces to something below the level of constant interference. And in the reduced alarm state, the appreciation that was always present but always competed against has room to land, fully, without competition. And what lands is the specific, accurate, cannot be minimized now truth of what you were, what they are actually realizing. The realization is not generic, it is specific, and its specificity is worth understanding. They are realizing that what you brought was not ordinary. The avoidant has been in other relationships, has encountered other people who were warm, who were genuine, who cared with real depth. The comparison that the interval produces is not flattering to the general supply of human connection. Not because other people are insufficient, but because what you specifically brought had a quality that is not commonly available, the depth of seeing, the specific, accurate, nothing important missed quality of your perception. The experience of being genuinely known, not managed or processed or understood as a type, but known as this specific person with this specific interior, is something the avoidant has not consistently found elsewhere. The warmth that did not carry a bill, the love that was genuinely offered without the implicit tracking of whether it was being matched. The generosity that came from fullness rather than from the anxious need to secure reciprocation. These qualities are rarer than the avoidant understood while they were receiving them. The steadiness, the specific quality of someone who saw the wound and the behavior it produced and stayed, not because they were unable to leave, but because they chose, repeatedly and genuinely, to remain. That choosing was visible even when it was not named, and its absence is visible now. These are the specific things they are realizing, not that the relationship was good, that you were extraordinary, what this realization does to the constructed narrative. The avoidant built a narrative, a careful, internally consistent, real materials assembled story about why the leaving was right. The incompatibilities that were real, the concerns that were genuine, the version of the relationship that was smaller than it actually was, constructed specifically to make the distance feel like wisdom rather than fear. The realization of your value is what the narrative cannot survive, not through argument, not through confrontation. Simply through the accumulated evidence of your absence producing the specific gray that the narrative promised would not be produced. The narrative said the relationship was not right. The absence says the relationship was real enough to leave a specific and located hole. The narrative said the concerns were valid. The absence says whatever the concerns were, they were not adequate accounting for what was also present. The narrative said they would be fine. The absence says fine is not the same as what was possible with you. The narrative fails piece by piece, not in a single dramatic collapse. In the daily, accumulating way that stories fail when the evidence against them keeps arriving without producing the predicted result. The specific moment the realization becomes undeniable. There is a moment not always identifiable from the outside, not always visible in behavior, where the realization crosses from background awareness into something that cannot be managed into the background again. It tends to arrive in contrast. A moment with someone new where something is genuinely good, warmth is present, the connection is real, the person is worthy of knowing, and underneath the genuine goodness is the specific awareness of what is absent. The particular quality that was present with you that is not present here. The specific kind of being known that your perception produced. The specific quality of warmth that your generosity generated. The contrast is not a judgment against the new person. They are not failing, they are simply not you. And not you is something the avoidance interior can now distinguish with precision, because the interval has taught them what your specific presence actually consisted of, or it arrives in memory. In the involuntary, unscheduled arrives before the management can intercept its surfacing of a specific moment, not a highlight, something ordinary, the specific quality of an ordinary Tuesday in your presence, the texture of simply being with you when nothing was particularly significant, and in the ordinariness of the memory, the full weight of what that ordinariness contained. The companionship, the ease, the specific quality of being genuinely accompanied, or it arrives in the flatness. The persistent, ambient, cannot be explained by external circumstances flatness of a life from which a particular register of experience has been removed, the daily evidence of absence as an active quality rather than a neutral state. In whatever form it arrives, the moment of undeniable recognition has a specific quality the avoidant cannot file away. The understanding that what was lost was not replaceable by the general passage of time and the general resumption of life, was you, specifically, irreplaceably, what the realization does and does not change. The realization is real, its significance is genuine. It represents the avoidance honest accounting, arrived at through the specific, costly education of your absence, of what you actually were and what the relationship actually contained. This matters, not as a promise of anything, as the accurate picture of what was mutual in the connection. You were not alone in what you felt, were not wrong about what was there. Were not excessive in your perception of the depth of the connection. The realization confirms that your reading of the relationship was accurate. That confirmation has genuine value. It removes the specific doubt that avoidant dynamics reliably install, the doubt about whether the love was real on both sides, whether the depth was mutual, whether you were perceiving genuinely or projecting hopefully. You were perceiving genuinely, and the realization does not automatically produce anything else, does not guarantee action. The realization can be genuine and still not produce the reach, can be real and still be managed. The avoidance management protocol is sophisticated enough to contain even genuine recognition for extended periods, converting it into something that can be lived with rather than acted on, does not guarantee readiness. Even if the reach comes, even if the recognition produces contact, the fundamental question of whether the avoidant has done the work that changes the architecture, that question is not answered by the realization, is answered only by sustained behavioral evidence over real time, does not determine your choices. What you do with the knowledge that the realization is happening, how you hold it, what weight you give it, whether it reorganizes your daily life or is held in the clear-eyed peripheral awareness of someone whose primary investment is genuinely elsewhere, that belongs entirely to you. What you are worth not as comfort as fact. This needs to be said plainly without the softening that makes it easier to dismiss as consolation. What you brought to the relationship was genuinely extraordinary, the quality of seeing, the warmth without demand, the patience that came from understanding rather than from the performance of tolerance. The specific, irreplaceable presence of someone who perceived accurately and stayed anyway. These qualities are not common, are not available through the general supply of connection, are the product of a specific interior depth that not everyone has and that cannot be manufactured through effort or goodwill alone. The avoidant is realizing this. The realization is real. And it is also, honestly, not the most important version of this truth. The most important version is not that the avoidant is realizing your value. It is that your value exists independently of anyone's realization of it, was true before this relationship, is true now. Will be true regardless of whether the realization produces action or is managed back into the background of the avoidant's private interior. The value is not located in their recognition of it, it is located in you. In the specific, genuine, extraordinary qualities that are yours, that you bring to everything and everyone, that make you capable of the depth of love and perception and presence that this relationship called on. Those qualities are not diminished by having been brought somewhere they could not be fully received. They are not waiting for validation. They are simply there, completely yours. As they have always been, as they will continue to be, regardless of what the avoidant does with the realization that is finally, honestly arriving in their interior. The realization is theirs, the value is yours. That is the honest end of this. The realization has been described, what it consists of, why it arrives late, what it does and does not change. That is real and stands. What 3,000 more words can add is something more grounded, the honest examination of what this realization means practically, for both people, in the actual texture of daily life rather than in the psychological portrait of what is happening in the avoidant's interior. The gap between their realization and your life. The avoidant is realizing your value. That is happening in their interior, on their timeline, in the private and unwitnessed space of their own processing. Your life is happening simultaneously, in real time, in the actual hours of actual days that are not waiting for their realization to arrive or to produce action. These two things, their interior realization and your exterior life, are running in parallel and are not, despite how it can feel, in conversation with each other. The realization does not reach you unless they act on it, and acting on it is a separate step that many realizations never produce. This parallel running matters practically because of what it asks of you: nothing. The realization asks nothing of you, requires nothing of you, does not obligate any particular posture, not waiting, not hoping, not the strategic positioning of yourself to be maximally available when the realization eventually produces a reach. The realization is theirs, your life is yours. They are running independently, and your job is not to align your life with the timeline of their internal processing. Your job, if that word applies, is to be genuinely in your own life, not as a strategy for influencing their timeline, as the basic, honest, entirely available act of being present in your own existence. What genuine value actually consists of. The framing of this has been, the avoidant is realizing how loving and valuable you are, and that framing is accurate as a description of what is happening in them. But the word valuable deserves examination. Because value, in the context of intimate relationships, gets used in ways that can subtly reinstall the dynamic that caused the problem in the first place. If your value is primarily located in what you gave, in the quality of your seeing, the warmth of your presence, the depth of your understanding, the generosity of your love, then the value is defined by your function in relation to someone else, by what you provided, by how you served the connection. That is a version of value, and those qualities are genuinely extraordinary. But it is not the deepest version. The deepest version of your value is not located in what you gave to this relationship or any relationship. It is located in who you are independently of any giving, in the fact of your existence as a specific, particular, irreducible human being who has genuine interior depth and genuine perception and genuine capacity for love. That value does not require a relationship to be real, does not require recognition to exist, does not increase when someone realizes it or decrease when someone fails to. It simply is. And the distinction between value as function and value as being is one that this dynamic has a specific tendency to obscure. Because the dynamic drew heavily on your functional value, your seeing, your warmth, your patience, your understanding, and in drawing on it, may have reinforced the implicit message that these qualities were the source of your worth. They are expressions of your worth, not the source of it. The source is prior to any expression, prior to any relationship, prior to any realization by anyone. Simply the fact of being genuinely, irreducibly, specifically you, what the interval has taught if it has been used. For the person who loved the avoidant, the period since the connection changed has been an interval, not chosen, imposed by the circumstances of the dynamic, but real. With real hours and real content that was either genuinely lived or spent in orientation toward the avoidance movements. If the interval has been genuinely used, if the work of returning to your own interior has actually happened, if the investment in your own life has been real rather than performed, something specific has developed that is worth naming. Self-knowledge that was not available before, not because you were unknowing before, but because the interval, with its enforced absence of the relationship as the primary organizing principle, has required you to encounter yourself in a way that the relationship's ongoing demands did not. When the primary question is no longer what is happening in the dynamic, the secondary questions become primary. What do you actually want? What engages you genuinely? What kind of love do you actually need rather than what kind you convinced yourself was sufficient? What are your actual standards, not the standards you held aspirationally while consistently accepting less? These questions, answered honestly across the interval, produce a quality of self-knowledge that changes what you bring to any subsequent connection, including, if it comes, a reconnection with the avoidant. You know more clearly what you need, what you will and will not accept, what genuine showing up looks like and what it doesn't. What the difference is between a relationship that is working and one that is producing the sophisticated appearance of working while costing you something real. That knowledge is protective, not in the defended, walls-up sense. In the grounded, clear-eyed, genuinely self-possessed sense of someone who knows what they are looking for and can distinguish it from what they are being offered. What a return would actually need to contain. If the realization produces action, if the avoidant reaches, if some form of return becomes possible, the question of what that return would actually need to contain is worth thinking through honestly before it arrives. Because thinking through it clearly before the warmth of the return makes clear thinking more difficult is genuinely useful. The return would need to contain honest acknowledgement, not the casual resumption of contact as though nothing significant had happened, not the oblique, deniable reach that maintains maximum plausible deniability about what the reaching is actually doing. Something more direct than that. Some version of honest recognition, however imperfect, however limited by the avoidance facility with direct emotional expression, that the distance was produced by their fear and that what was lost was significant. This acknowledgement does not need to be perfectly articulated, does not need to arrive in the therapeutic language of attachment theory. But it needs to be present in some recognizable form, because a return that does not acknowledge what produced the leaving is a return that has not genuinely reckoned with the leaving, is a return that is about the relief of your presence rather than the commitment to staying in it. The return would need to contain evidence of work. Not the declaration of having changed. Declarations are easy and cost nothing. The behavioral evidence over time of someone who is actively engaging with the pattern rather than running it. This evidence does not arrive immediately. It accumulates across weeks and months of consistent behavior, of showing up in the ordinary moments, of staying present when the intimacy deepens rather than creating distance at the threshold, of seeking support, therapeutic or otherwise, for the specific work of becoming available. The return would need to be received by you from your actual current position, not from the position you were in when the dynamic was most active. From where you actually are now, more self-knowing, more grounded, more genuinely occupied with your own life, clearer about what you need and what you will not again quietly discount. That position is different from where you were, and the return entering that position produces a genuinely different dynamic than the return resuming what was. The honest thing about realizations. Realizations are common, more common than the changes they sometimes produce. People realize the value of things they lost with some regularity, realize what a relationship contained, what a person brought, what the specific quality of a particular connection was that they did not fully account for while it was present. These realizations are real. They are not trivial, and they frequently do not produce change, not because the people having them are dishonest or unwilling, but because realization is cognitive and change is behavioral, and the distance between the two is not crossed through the force of recognition alone. Requires the specific, embodied, repeated work of doing things differently in the actual moments when the old pattern would ordinarily run. The avoidant who is realizing your value is not, by virtue of that realization, someone who is doing that work, may begin it, may be motivated by the realization to begin it in a way they were not motivated before. That motivation is genuinely significant. It is the realization serving its most useful function. But whether the motivation produces the work, and whether the work is sustained through the inevitable difficulty and nonlinearity of genuine pattern change, that is what determines whether the realization becomes anything that enters your life in a useful form. Watch for the work. Not for the realization. The realization is interior and invisible and already happening. The work is behavioral and visible and either happening or not. That is the honest distinction that protects you from organizing your life around a realization that may not become anything more. What you do while the realization runs its course. Your life continues. This is not a platitude, it is the literal truth of what is available and what is real. The realization is running in their interior. The work is or is not happening. The reach is or is not coming. The return is or is not possible in a form that would actually serve both of you. All of that is theirs to determine, on their timeline, through their choices. Your life, actual, present, full of genuine content that is yours, continues regardless. And the most honest and most important thing available to you is to be genuinely in it. Not as the move that produces the realization becoming action, not as the strategy that keeps you positioned favorably for a return that may or may not come. Not as the performance of someone who has moved on, designed to signal to the avoidant that the window is closing. Simply as the honest, present, genuinely invested in occupation of the life that is yours, the work you find genuinely interesting, the people who are actually present and actually capable of reciprocity. The questions about your own becoming that deserve the quality of attention you have historically brought to other people's interiors. the daily, ordinary, unobserved investment in what makes your existence feel genuinely inhabited. That life does not wait for the realization to produce action. It is already real. It is already yours. It is already worth being fully present in. And the version of you that is fully present in it, genuinely occupied, genuinely self-possessed, genuinely building something that belongs to you, is both the version most capable of receiving a genuine return if it comes, and the version most worth being regardless of whether it does. That version does not need the avoidance realization to be complete, was complete before the realization. Will be complete after it, whatever it becomes. That completeness is not the destination of this journey. It is where you already are if you are willing to inhabit it fully. Now,